Wow. See a group so full of people, all my lovely, lovely friends and relations, and some I haven't seen for so long. Welcome. We're so delighted that you came all this way. To me, when someone says St. Albans, it seems like, oh my God, it's out of London. But it's in the midst of winter, it's not so cold today, but really, really thank you for coming and for your support. You know, without people, there is no event, so thank you. I'd like to introduce my publisher and producer for Silent Voice, who very kindly and very creatively put together the book. And we've also worked before. In 2010, we did Embracing Life After Cancer. We did 10,000 copies, and I love working with him. He's very patient, and I bug him so much, so I'm surprised he's still with me for the next project.
Thank you. Bunshri, thank you. So yeah, I'm Eddie Ephraums. As Bunshri said, I'm the publisher and the producer of the book. Over the years, I've worked with quite a number of photographers on their book projects. And a lot of them have tended to be kind of wildlife conservation books, where the photographers are traveling to the kind of the farthest corners of the earth. They're scaling some of the highest mountains. They're going in search of kind of the most elusive and beautiful subjects. And then we have Bunshri's book. And Bunshri hasn't gone to the far corners of the earth. In fact, she's gone no further than conferences and no further than the room of her mother-in-law, Ramada, who she's photographed and spoken to be able to produce this book. And I think it's a real testament to her skills, both as a photographer and as a creative person. Somebody who cares very deeply about the subjects that she photographed. Do not need to go any further than that to actually find her subjects within her family and to be able to share that with her community. And of course, the subject that we're dealing with today, as I'm sure you may know, is to do with Alzheimer's that Ramada suffered with. And the fact that in the course of us doing the research here, I was very surprised to find out that 1 in 3 of us will at some point probably develop some form of dementia, which is quite a startling statistic. So it makes her book, I think, incredibly relevant, incredibly important as a subject. So we'll be going through the book today, but before we do, Bunshri did ask me just to remind you to switch your mobile phones off, if you wouldn't mind. So what we're going to do, you're probably not familiar with the book. Some of you may have had a chance to have a look at the back. We've just made a little video of it, flicking through the pages so you can see the content. After we've done that, we're going to do a question and answer session, or at least that was the plan. I put together a whole lot of questions for Bunshri, and as she does, she put a lot of time and effort into coming up with the answers, and she read them through to me yesterday. And I was incredibly struck by just how well she captured what the book is about, what the subject is about, and I sat there and it was kind of like book of bedtime or book of the week. I mean, it was just absolutely extraordinary. So we had a slight little change. What we're going to do is, instead of going through questions and answers, I'm going to read out the questions, and Bunshri very kindly offered to read out what she wrote. It's really, I thought, very beautifully written, Bunshri, so I'm sure everybody will enjoy and appreciate that. After that, we'll have an actual Q&A session, so if you have any questions that you want to ask, then that's the point at which to do it. Bunshri asked me just to mention that Dr. David Levy is here. I'm not sure I get this right. Dr. David Levy is a consultant, a physician, is that correct? Looking after, caring for the elderly, and he looked after Ramada, Bunshri's mother-in-law. So he's very happy to take any medical questions you might have. He stressed to me it's medical questions, so not photographic or bookmaking questions.
We asked him to just wave his hand so people know who he is. There you go, he's over there.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right, so if we just start off with the viewing of the book. The video will last about 2 minutes, and then after that we'll go through the questions. Bunshri, when did you first realise Rumba had Alzheimer's? Can you tell us a little bit about what you noticed, and also tell us something of her reaction to being diagnosed?
Well, I'd taken Rumba to Kenya in 2019 when I realised something wasn't quite right. I packed a bag here with her toiletries, and when we got to the other end, when I was unpacking her bag in Nairobi, there were 3 toilet bags with pretty much the same things in her suitcase, something she had packed. Also, I noticed that she always felt more at ease when I was with her in Nairobi, whereas in the past, she would have happily made her own plans to visit extended family and friends. It's like she was clinging on to me and she always wanted to be there. What was the second part of the question?
Something of her reaction to being diagnosed. What was her reaction?
Well, we were sitting in the doctor's surgery, and the doctor kind of examined her, and then he said, "I think you may be forgetting things." And Rama didn't say anything, and he said, "It could be Alzheimer's." And there was complete pin-drop silence in the room. We were all in shock. Cash was there, my husband and myself, and his brother Beach. And after a while, what it seemed like 10 minutes, I'm sure it wasn't, but Ramaba said, "But I can drive." And she was 85 at the time. So she'd been zipping around in her Mercedes all that time. And she would also go to her religious readings in the morning, leave home at 7 o'clock. And afterwards we also found out that she wouldn't only just set up, where they were having greetings in the room. But afterwards, she would drop each and every one of them home, people who would come by bus. So we knew nothing about Alzheimer's at the time. So this is the final chair image. The void. I feel the void. Having lived together for 43 years, since the day I got married, to have her no longer there. Sorry, excuse me. After she passed, I'd given the cushion of her chair to be upholstered. I saw the nail. It touched a nerve in me. I miss her. Oh boy, do I miss her.
You mentioned Mercedes earlier. That seemed to bring a lot of joy to her life. Do you want to share a few thoughts about that?
She used to zip around in a Mercedes right until she was 84 or 85 years of age. And sometimes she would be sitting at a dressing table, facing the window, and the Mercedes would be parked right outside. And she would look at it. And if I may, I might just read out one of the quotes that she wrote for Mercedes. So this is what she said. I'd taken a photo of the Mercedes in the snow, so most of it was covered. And I showed her the image. And this is what she said. He would come into my bed and tell me, I will take you out in my car. They won't let me drive now. I drove Babuji's, father's, Fred Mercedes. I took them to school in the box body, the minivan. We also had a red Mini. So, because her memory was quite sporadic, I kind of wrote footnotes in the book. And having a conversation one-to-one with her, I gathered this is how it was. So she was talking about her first grandchild when he was 4. He would often sneak into her bed in the middle of the night. Christian. She learned to drive at a young age. Later, at her marital home, she transported the children to school in the minivan. One of her relations had left the red Mini with her in London whilst he was away for 4 months. That was Ashwin. I don't know if Ashwin's here. Her black Mercedes sat in the driveway. She often looked out of the window at it. So driving meant a lot to her because she also said something about that when she was diagnosed. Like, can I drive?
And I understand that cooking was also important. So the image here that we've got up on the screen, we've got here. Do you want to share a little bit about that one?
Yes, well first of all, I'd like to say that I never learned to make rocklas because Rama made the best rocklas ever. So this dowry was for Kisumu, and she treasured it. It was wrapped in newspaper, then wrapped with bubble wrap, and then it came out to be used each time. So what she said about Rotla, about this image, was it's an art. When they were looking for a wife, they would know they could make Rotlas. You are the one. I've been making them since I was 11. Oh. And we also made papa. We laughed and laughed. So I say, the dowry from Kisumu is used for cooking rotlas, millet bread, our ancestors' staple food. There was great community spirit in Kenya, where the ladies would sit cross-legged under the hot sun in the shared open courtyard to roll out papadums. The young girls would sneak bits of hot dough into their mouths, whilst placing the delicate papar to dry on the sari material laid out on the floor.
And there was another image that you said you wanted to talk about, which was the Ganesh.
Ah, the Ganesh. Here we go. So one day we were sitting in the family room downstairs, and there's this painting which a really good friend of mine has done. It had the Ganesh on it. And remember, when I spotted her looking at it, I said, Mom, isn't that beautiful, this painting? Rocco did it, but it wasn't about the painting she talked. She said he was big. He popped out too quickly. I had so many tears. It was Dowdy, he took me, he stayed at home. I said, what do you mean, Mom? You had tears? She said, no, I had tears. So in 1955, Ramaba's eldest son, Cash, my husband, was born at her mother's home in Nairobi. The driver rushed her to the hospital where she spent 2 weeks. Both her mother and sister nurtured the newborn at her home. A lot of Jain households have knowledge in some form. It is our supreme duty, the removal of all obstacles. So this flower that you can see, this was like a multi-exposure. I'd done that because that's the time I was kind of drying the flowers, and I thought it went quite well together.
And you mentioned earlier the table that you had photographed the flowers on that prompted some of her first memories. So they've got it up on screen here. You want to add a few thoughts about that?
So this was a table where I had a light bulb moment. This was all the way from Jaipur. I had to fix all the insides of them with a hammer. I was so lucky. He took me away for a whole year. In 1966, the table with Mexican stools had arrived in London from India via Kenya. They were not all quite intact. She cherished them dearly, particularly as her late husband had bought them during their world tour. So they had gone on a world tour before they settled in London, coming from Kenya. They'd gone around the world for a whole year. So,
And a favourite image?
her favourite image.
Or your favourite image from the
Okay.
book?
This image means a lot to me. Because, where's my mom? Because this is the sari that my mom embroidered before she got married. And then she took it to her marital home. And when I got married, I took it to my marital home. And when I showed this, I think we were looking through the sari at some stage with Ramaba. And it was the same week it was my mum's birthday, and I'd asked her once, Mum, would you like to write something in Ramaba's card? She said, not today. But 2 days later I said, Mum, would you like to just sign the card? So she said, okay. But what she wrote in the card was, we were childhood friends, and you gave me your daughter. So that just means it's a very special story for me.
And it's worth pointing out that in the exhibition that's at the back of the museum, the invisible threads, which are part of that show, is the actual sari is on the show there. Do you want to tell people a little bit about that?
About the sari. Okay, so I don't know, sari to me kind of signifies the family dynamics, the diaspora, and our culture, and it just means a lot. So if you, I'm sure I will mention it later, but when you see the multimedia exhibition, when you walk into the exhibition, the sari is the first one you'll see in the cabinet. Because it's like passed from one generation to another, and we just still value that, and really treasure that. And Ramaba was one for treasuring objects. I mean, really, I mean, there are many objects in there which I found even after she passed. We'll see.
So we'll mention the exhibition at the end, but I think it's also worth mentioning that in the cabinet with the sari is some knitting in the bottom. Do you just want to add a few words about that?
Mm-hmm. So, to keep Ramaba, his mind ticking and her hands working, Nishnal, her daughter, my sister-in-law, had bought her some wool, and she asked her to knit when her Alzheimer's was first diagnosed. And Mom started knitting a scarf. It's still not finished. She knitted rather a lot, but it's still left unfinished. It's there in the cabinet. So that's from daughter to mother. So this goes around the circle, the mother and daughter relationship. So I thought that was quite interesting. And also at some stage, I got Mama to write a journal. Some days she would write like 2 lines, some days a quarter of pages. And I don't know, I may have mentioned it before, but it just means a lot to me that Hansa, when Diane passed, there were some days when Brahma would say to me, I'd say, "Oh, would you like to write in the journal?" She said, "No, you go and write in your journal, I don't want to do that." But that day, she wrote, I'll show it to you one day, she's written like 3/4 of a page, and she cried. So, yeah.
So yeah, well, just a few more details about the exhibition at the end of the Q&A. Bunshri, thanks for sharing your thoughts on those pictures. So, I guess it's an inevitable question that if I'm working with a photographer on a book, I always want to ask, which is what do they hope the book will achieve? So maybe you'd like to share a few thoughts on that.
Well, I hope it prompts other artists to cover subjects that are important to them, subjects that might be taboo. Encourage people to spend time with their loved ones, and that's a special time. I know I may have said this before, but I cannot stress how much our one-to-one conversations meant to me. It was our time together. All those stories I may never have heard, they may never have been told. Because when she was well and very independent, she would do her thing, she would go out, we would sing in a car, we would do our own thing. But during the pandemic, we had so much time together. And when I started hearing her stories, I just wanted to hear more and more.
I think if anybody's worked with Bunshri, and I imagine some of you have had the pleasure, when you ask the question, what do you hope something will achieve, with Bunshri, you know it's not just going to sit in a cupboard and not go anywhere. As she mentioned earlier, the Embracing Life After Cancer booklet that we did with Macmillan, I can remember going into that meeting, and this was when Bunshri had just started photography, and she said, "Oh, come on, why don't we have a meeting with Macmillan?" And I thought, okay, fair enough. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, I have to say. And so we go in, and one of Bunshri's many skills, it's never to say I, it's always to say we. What are we going to do? What are we going to do about something? How are we going to do this book? And I think Macmillan had never met anybody like her before. And it wasn't a case of, well, we'll print 500 leaflets and they'll go in a cupboard. They'll say, well, how many do you think we ought to print? And I can't remember exactly how many you said to begin with, but it was something like, well, 10,000. And, in my mind, I could just see that thinking, well, that's a large cupboard, we're going to have to store all these leaflets. And then it wasn't very long later, I remember Bunshri phoning up and she said, well, I've got rid of all my leaflets. And I thought, well, maybe 100, 200. And how many have you got rid of yourself? I think about 4,000 or 5,000 or something.
Well, it was over 3 or 4 years. I did presentations everywhere in the right places, and they were given that free of charge.
Well, yeah, it's still extremely impressive, I have to say, absolutely amazing. So, asking the question, what do you hope the book will achieve? I think in my mind, when we started this project, it was very clear that Bunshri could do something amazing with it. So, and has done an incredible job of producing the book, the pictures, getting the words together. As you've seen for yourself, those of you who've seen the book already have the chance to see it. I mean, it's an extraordinary achievement. It really is.
Thank you, but I can't do it on my own. I think without people's help, we together can make a difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of Bunshri's other skills, I think, as you can see, is getting people together. There's never a no if she invites you to do something. My experience, and I think I can share this, no is not an option. No is definitely not an option. Eddie, when are we going to do the book? Well, it's not an option, it's not if, it's when. So I think, speaking personally, effect of the book isn't just the actual printed result, it's the effect that Bunshri and people like her, I think, have on the people and those around them. It's amazing achievement, Bunshri. Well done.
But without you, it wouldn't have been the book it is. The collector's edition is like a look at the world, allowing people to look into her world. And this other one is like hand-stitched, so it's like stitching her memories together. It's just, I've really felt at ease with you. I was a bit annoyed when you wouldn't answer my phone calls a few times. I do bargain a lot.
Well, on which point? Yes, anyway, Saturday night.
Sorry. Can I do if I have thoughts on a Saturday night?
Fantastic. Wouldn't have it any other way. The next question is really, what has the experience of making the book taught you? I think perhaps I maybe ought to ask myself that question. But no, Bunshri, seriously, what's the experience of making the book taught you as a relative and a carer of someone with Alzheimer's, and also as a photographer, artist, wanting to make a statement about an important issue?
Well, I really get that anything is possible when it comes from the heart. To find a new, unique way to present a subject, to draw people in, to contemplate, to question, to take action. About Alzheimer's, what I really, really got was that you never really lose the true essence of a person. That's always there, underneath the disease, always there. And Ramava, right towards the end, she wouldn't come downstairs before putting her foundation on, before putting the bikini on, make sure all the buttons were done properly on her sweater, her hair was in place, and she would come down.
What do you think Ramava would say about the book?
Well, my son, her grandson, when he was helping us pack the books, he said, "Mum, Ramava would have been so proud. What would I say to Ramava? Ramava, it was a great collaboration. My images and your words."
Bunshri, thank you so much for sharing with us. That was very thoughtful, amazingly insightful, I think, for anybody who's wanting to know anything about Alzheimer's. Intensely personal. So thank you so much, really appreciate it.
I'm also from the Royal Photographic Society. And so the question really is, would you like to make some comments about how you curated the book? Because there are two aspects. There's the visual and the quotations, and bringing those two things together, coalescing that into what is a wonderful presentation, is very difficult, particularly where you have the emotion already imbued in both the written material and the visual material. How did you manage the curation? Or perhaps should be a
It's a question for Eddie, to be honest.
Thank you.
That was a great question, thank you so much. Well, I think there's a number of ways to answer this. One of them is, Bunshri's already alluded to it, which is working together in collaboration. One of the unique qualities of photography is that you can do it entirely by yourself. But actually, that can really be a trap. You can take the pictures, you can edit, you can process them, you can design a book, you can do the whole lot by yourself. And indeed, I'm sure many people here have actually produced their own books and used an online publisher to do it. And you don't need any help to do that. But of course, working in collaboration, a conversation starts, a certain dynamic develops. You begin to hear, I think, which doesn't normally happen when you're working by yourself, you start to hear yourself think. It's not the little voice inside your head that you listen to, but it's actually what you're really trying to say comes over. So you have an idea, you share it, and almost the moment you share it, you speak it, you can begin to hear, does it work or doesn't it? And bit by bit, the project began to evolve that way. So there was a lot of sharing of ideas, there was a lot of to and fro. I think there was COVID in between. It's taken a long time to get here, and of course, the longer it takes, you think the better it is. Well, the longer you have to doubt yourself, the more opportunity you have to query what you're doing, whether it's any good, should we change this, should we change that. What Bunshri just wrote yesterday, in fact, in answer to my questions, I was absolutely staggered at what she wrote and how eloquent it was. I don't think it's indiscreet of me to say that I have a spreadsheet that I kept of the time we spent working together, and I think probably on 2 sentences is about 8 hours. So, it's the to and fro, it's also allowing time for things to happen. It's also, and Bunshri, I think, would be the first to say this, it's having a deadline. And knowing that at some point you've got to produce this thing, at some point you're going to have a launch, you're going to have an exhibition, does an incredible lot to focus the mind. And I think one learns to get out of one's own way, and you let the project take over. But in addition to that, I should say that obviously there are printers, various other people involved who have incredible skills to make a handmade book, like this, the sewn book, and also the collector's edition in the box. There's a very special lay flat format of the pages. There's no joins in the pages. So there are 200 of them made, and I know the person who's glued every page by hand. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to Aaron. But yeah, very much a collaborative experience. Not necessarily something that you can teach, because probably if we did it all over again, we'd probably do it completely differently. Not because it's no good, quite the opposite.
Can I just add something? The critique would come from art news. She actually, when she saw the book, she actually said that this is a book like it's an accordion. It opens and closes. When you see certain things, you miss a few things, you revisit it, and you see something different.
Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other questions?
What I'm struck about is that your relationship. What struck me is that, I knew my mother-in-law very well, but the relationship, the strength of the relationship with my mother, I can imagine, but the strength of your relationship with your mother-in-law is for me quite extraordinary. In that relationship, this must be exceptional, I would say. I'm just that's my observation, just as on a personal level.
I think my mom's here. I think I would have chosen to live with my mother-in-law any day than with my mother. Because my mom is also very independent. She wants to do everything. For instance, when we want to go around there for dinner, she'll say, what can I make? I'll say, I'll bring something. She said, well, don't come there. And with my mother-in-law, I've been living with her for 43 years. And even when I was growing up, I would look up to her because she would always be dressed like this. There's no such word as specialista, that's what I called her. She would have different hairstyles, everything would be matching. She'd be well-traveled. That we were always going out for meals, something we didn't do at that time. And after I got married, she always wanted to do things with me. She would, I joined the pottery class, she came. I joined the jewellery class, she came. So we were close. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Are there any other questions anybody wants to?
Thank you for sharing. I always remember grandma, she's always immaculate. I think it's the invisible, visible, that like that. And we're working on Alzheimer's research, and I think we need to talk about it even more. And in the Asian population, we're not talking about Alzheimer's. We're not talking about any of the diseases of the brain. So by sharing this, I think we all need to come together and talk more with each other. I'd really like to know more about your journey of diagnosis and what was that like? And just getting what you need, because I think the beautiful photographs of that tell us a lot about your relationship, and I love that sort of the multi-layerness that you've created here. But I think a lot of people would probably would like to hear more about the practicalities of things that happen as you get diagnosed, what you go through as family and things.
That's a really good question, actually. It was, well, we had to learn a lot ourselves about Alzheimer's. And we have a very good family. My husband and his brother took care of all the carers. So we had carers coming in, but we also wanted Rama to be very mobile and for her muscles to be working. So Cash always said, my husband said that, no, we're not going to have a chairlift in her until it's really necessary. So she would be coming up and down the stairs. Okay, someday she was very trusting with my son. And someday she would say to Cash, I don't want you, don't push me, can you bring Shoma? He can take me up the stairs. But we would always have like a chiropractor come in, and she had a very good relationship with him because it was someone from outside, someone different to talk to. So they would have also a conversation as well as him help her with her physical health. We had a physio coming now and again. And sometimes her boys would take her for a spin in the car, and she still loved going to restaurants. So all that interconnection was very important. And during the pandemic, because people couldn't come, even the grandchildren couldn't come, but they would come. They would wait at the driveway and wave at her from the window. People would come, and when we were allowed in the garden, we could still sit quite far apart because we had to be very careful that she wasn't going to get COVID. But the interconnection was very important. Lots of cousins, sisters, everyone would call her. So just even though sometimes she wouldn't remember, and if people would ask her, what did you have for breakfast? She would kind of just worry about it and feel frustrated. But sometimes it wasn't even what you said, it was how you said it. It's the feelings, it's the touch. That's what she really liked. And I think during the pandemic, because all of us were at home, my husband and his brother, and we were all working from home, it kind of helped to have people around for her. But it can be very isolating. I think sometimes you feel that because a person doesn't understand, you may talk to the person next to her, but if you just touch her and just kind of say something, she knows that you're there. It's a love. It's the love that they need. And she was fine right until the end, even though this woman was so strong. Maybe she'd been through 2 heart attacks, broken femur bone, stroke. She just kept going. She was amazingly strong right till the end. And even before she went to the hospital, she walked down the stairs. And 2 weeks before that, she wouldn't. You know, sometimes they say that you can see that there's a big puddle down there, but she was really quite amazing. Yeah, so beautiful, beautiful woman, really well missed.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
I just really, obviously, your mum says I'm married to this. Did you notice any sort of personality changes during the course of the Alzheimer's developing?
Yes. she would get angry sometimes, and probably frustrated more with her than anyone else, because she used to be very independent and she couldn't do a lot of things. But one thing we kind of got was that you never contradict them. You always go with the flow. If she talked about, like, she'll say, one of the days she said, looking out of the window, she said, look, you see those 3 people with red hats? I'm waving at them, but they're not doing anything. But you'd never say that, come, don't be silly, those people aren't there. You would say, maybe they're just passing by. And then that would prompt another conversation. Do you think, is it outside Joe Carl's house? Could it be outside Farrell's house? And that will prompt another conversation. And I found that it was usually when she was tired, that's why it was really important that she would have a nap in the afternoons and that. But otherwise she looked really healthy, because in the pandemic we were all at home, and we also got used to having a main meal at lunch and so on. And even though she took a long time to eat and everything, and sometimes you talk about personality, but there's also other things like timekeeping. Sometimes she would mix up whether it's morning or whether it's night and so on. And I think one day she wanted to get dressed at like 5 o'clock in the morning and so on. But at that time we also had a living carer who was amazing. And she actually had a real good bond with the carers, because they also brought a different conversation to her rather than just a family. So we try and talk about different things. And one of the things in the book she also says is that my son took me to the movies. And all he had done was he put on Netflix for her to watch Mother India, because it was a movie. So we kind of knew she loved Indian songs, she loved Indian movies, so those are the kind of things you do. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I've had some experience with, families have quite said somebody who would be very shy would actually, when Alzheimer sets in, would become quite extrovert or sort of vice versa. But there seems to be some connection with it.
Yeah. Also, when we were in Kenya, when I thought something isn't right, we'd gone to one of her cousin's houses for dinner, and she was just piling on her plate. She just wanted to take more and more food. And we thought, she's not going to be able to eat all this, but hey, we just let it be. But those are the kind of things. And I've also noticed that they like to keep things, like tissues and that in all the drawers, because it's like, I don't know, it's like a safety blanket for them. So, I think initially I would think, oh no, Mom, you can't do this. And then I thought, no, it's like a safety blanket for her, let it be. Yeah. So I think we're just concentrating more on the things that she'd like to do, and the food she liked to eat. And she used to love eating sweet things. However, in hospital, just 3 days before she passed, I'd taken something sweet along. And she took a bite, she said, it's delicious, but don't you know I'm diabetic? So, yes, it was things like that. She was beautiful right till the end. And I'm sure she was frustrated sometimes, many times, but she was always a very calm person. And I think that trait kind of kept right towards the end.
Bunshri, that's amazing feat you achieved, producing in such a short space of time, and the exhibition really I think that's quite being single-minded to share with us your experiences. It's also a wonderful tribute to Ronaba, and a very unusual way of presenting it. I also want to say that, having been awarded the fellowship is quite a unique achievement, at least amongst in our community and amongst ourselves. So congratulations. I think she deserves congratulations for that. Just moving the discussion slightly, I mean, obviously Ramava was very fortunate in living in a joint family surrounded by family members, yourselves. You must have wondered what would happen down the generation when we get dementia. What kind of care are we going to be provided with? Because I'm sure my, daughter-in-law or children are not going to be in a position to provide the level of care and love that we would be able to.
That's really interesting, Vipul. Also the first part, that was very nice of you to say those kind words, and you would know all about photography because your late brother was a photographer who did lovely, lovely wildlife images. And the second part, sorry, what was the question?
How are we going to...
Oh yes, so this Wendy Mitchell, who got Alzheimer's when she was 58 years old, she actually says that she was a single parent, and she said that I didn't raise my daughters to be carers. I want them to be my children. So all I can say is let's look forward to really good care homes. Yeah. And the Oshawa community has been promising a care home. What's happening? We wish that we have one. No, but on a serious note, I think what's really important is that we all keep physically well, walking a lot, eating well, which I'm sure a lot of us do. But I don't know what or how you get Alzheimer's, but me for one, Eddie, I do. Cash tells me off about it, like a Scrabble. I play against the computer, my phone every day. So just try and do everything to keep healthy, and we also want easy lives for our children, right? Even though they're 40 or 39 or whatever. Thank you. So,
No, I was going to say, Bunshri talks about keeping busy. You mentioned your fellowship that you got a degree. At what age? Well, I shouldn't mention age, but towards your 60s, I believe.
no, when I was 60, I got, yeah.
So
I always wanted to do a degree, but hey, when I gave up the idea, that's when I did it.
So I think we're getting a pretty clear picture of Bunshri today. It's not just a degree, it was a first-class honours in photography and art. So, any other questions? But if not, we'll probably need to wrap things up.
I'd like to say thank you.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So I'd like to say a big thank you to St. Albans Museum, in particular to Sarah Keeling and Eleanor Payne. I know you guys aren't here today, but maybe you'll get to see the recording. And their team for their support for the project. It means so much for allowing me to host this event, touching on a subject so close to my heart. And all this has been organized, from the book to the exhibition to inviting you guys here. It's just been a month. So, other thanks to Dr. Levy. Dr. Levy, thank you for the wonderful care you provided for our Ramava. Not just looking after her needs, not just looking after her medically, but for always making her feel comfortable, like she could ask you absolutely anything. How she trusted with what you said, and what you did. And a big, big thank you to everyone who's attended, because without you, there would be no event. So, really, really thank you very much. And my heartiest thank you to all our team at Hertfordshire Photo Forum, and for Jim to liaising with everyone, all our team, and also to the people at the museum, the staff. If you hadn't planned for the Invisible Threads exhibition here, would Silent Voice be launched today? I think not. And for all my family and friends, you're all my family and friends, for helping me and supporting me always, always, for putting up with me being busy. And of course, to Cash, where are you? To Cash, my rock. He brought it here to my office today. This is the honest truth. He called Eddie yesterday and said, Eddie, I can't thank you enough. This book is simply amazing, the whole package, just unbelievable. And I'll have you know, Cash is very blunt. He won't compliment unless it's due.
Thank you, Cash.
And a big thank you to Eddie. Without your help and your support, your input for Silent Voice, the book would not have been what it is. Yeah, and I'm sorry for not evening, one Saturday evening special. Sometimes a Sunday too.
That's fine. All right, thank you, Bunshri. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And we should actually mention Cash. I believe you bought Bunshri a camera. Was it back in the 90s or whatever? So we have you to thank for all of this. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, so just a few final things to say. The books are on sale at the back of the room, far end. As Bunshri's mentioned, there's two versions, a collector's edition in a box with an original print that Bunshri signed. And then there's a standard edition, so they're both editions are very beautifully handmade, so they really are quite special. The prices are there 75 and 25, but all the profits are going to Alzheimer's research. So if you want any of you to make any kind of additional donation, obviously that would be great, very, very gratefully received. And just to stress, all the profits are going to Alzheimer's research. The books, I mean, they are a real work of love and a real work of art. So for me, I'm very familiar with books. The prices of them seem incredibly reasonable to me. They've not been manufactured in some far-off factory. They've been made very close to home. They are, I think, worth every penny. So, well done, Bunshri, again. Bunshri just asked me to say that after you bought your book, I think those were her words, after you bought your book, no, we've got the measure of her, totally. Could you sign the visitor's book if you have a moment? And then also down the corridor on the right is an exhibition that Bunshri is part of, Invisible Threads. And you'll find as you go down the right-hand corridor, you'll see the sari that she mentioned earlier in the glass cabinet. There's some very impressive knitting in the same cabinet as well. And then Bunshri's part of the exhibitions there, but obviously do see the whole show. If you have time, there's obviously the Henry Moore exhibition down in the basement, which is very, very impressive. And of course there is the amazing cafe. For those of you who aren't familiar with this place, is the seating area of the cafe is the actual courtroom. And you can go downstairs into the holding cell. So if you want a taste of what it's like to be at St Albans as a criminal in a cell, go down there. Very, very worthwhile having a look at. So yeah, just finally to say...
Yeah, and also...
I haven't finished it actually, Bunshri. I was wanting to say, Bunshri, congratulations again. You know, it really has been an amazing experience working with you, even on a Saturday night. So well done. Well done.
Thank you. And Ramava would never want anyone to leave without having something sweet in your mouth, so please pick up a chocolate. It's just by the book's table. Okay.
Thank you all so much.